Hello and welcome back. This is day 5 of Allies Previews, the final day of previews before the set releases. So, today, Donald X says there are no more themes but lots more cards. The set has 400 cards total, with 6 split piles, 25 regular kingdom card piles, and 23 allies. 25 times 11 plus 6 times 17 plus 23 equals 400. And now you know that the only victory cards are in split piles. So anyway, here are some more cards. So first up, we've got Importer, Courier, and Royal Galley. Importer, 4-cost duration action liaison. Oh, good, we get another liaison. At the start of your next turn, gain a card costing up to 5. Setup, each player gets +4 favors. Oh. Well, that's awkward. Okay, so Importer is like it's a 3-cost. It's like it's gain a card costing up to 5. I'm not sure if I said 4. My brain thought 4. I was looking at this as like similar to Cobbler, but no, card costing up to 5. So, it's a feast for the modern age. I mean, it kind of is, because, like, it's actually interesting to me, because when Feast got cut from first edition base, one of the things that Donald X said was that it wasn't especially interesting because, you know, you would open with Feast instead of silver or whatever, and then, you know, you would use it to get a 5 instead of hitting 5, but, you know, it amounted to the same thing. You got a 5 in your deck, whatever. I would think the same thing would apply here. I mean, I guess if you see it turn 4, then you don't actually get it into your shuffle, so that is not great, right? And in that sense, this is worse. It stays in your deck, which could be better or worse depending on like how many cards there are to gain and how often you want to be spending terminal space and, you know, a stop card on gaining them. But I would think in general that would be better, not worse. But yeah, the fact that it could miss, it is in fact more likely to miss than not by a little bit. Makes it gives it some significant downside compared to something where you're just going to buy the 5 cost, but it still seems like you're going to open with this a decent amount of the time. Like, if you open with this and like a Trasher, particularly a non-terminal Trasher, where you're not, because you're opening with the Trasher, you're not expecting to hit 5 anyway, then okay, yeah, you're more likely to have your 5 miss the shuffle, but if you were to get silver or whatever, you probably weren't going to be able to hit 5 regardless. So, you know, whatever. And there's some upside where you draw at turn 3, and then you do get your 5 before the shuffle. So, I mean, it seems like a nice card from that perspective. Not amazing, but as the game progresses, then, you know, it could also be pretty amazing, just being able to gain 5 costs every other turn, essentially. I mean, it's kind of like Vampire in that respect. Like, obviously it doesn't have the attack and it's terminal, and it doesn't help you trash. There's, you know, a lot of downsides relatively, but Vampire is another card that lets you gain 5s every other turn, essentially, and that's its most powerful effect, and Importer can at least do that much for you. So yeah, I mean, I guess the fact that it's delayed a turn continues to matter, of course, right? Like, compared to Vampire or other, really pretty much any other gainer, it's slower because you're not actually gaining the card until the turn after you play the Importer. So you know, that is a significant drawback, but for a 3 cost, like, doesn't seem like a huge problem. Now, the setup thing is weird to me, because that means that there are going to be liaisons, there are going to be games with allies where this is your only liaison and you just have 5 favors for the entire game. I would imagine that this means that there are going to be no allies that cost more than 5 favors to activate, which shouldn't be too surprising anyway, but we've already seen an ally that costs 5 favors. That's the like take another turn ally, which I forget what the name of that was. But that was from yesterday. I think it's Island Folk. Yeah. So like in a game with importer and no other liaisons, you get to do that once and just pick your spot. In a similar vein, like if you've got, I mean, this is like really bad with League of Bankers. Although, well, in a way, maybe it's good. You just get a permanent +1 right from the beginning of the game, which might actually be better than investing in favors in a lot of cases. So I take that back. But for like the trashing one, you get 5 trashes. For the discard and draw one, you get 5 of those, like etc. 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 There are some that cost 2 favors where you're only going to get 2 of those, and the favor is going to go to waste. Yeah, so we'll have to see what the other allies are to see whether like how useful it is to be able to do something that limited number of times. I mean, it's definitely interesting to have that hard limit on it and to just say like you have to plan out for the entire game, like how often do you want to use this limited resource. I can imagine it being frustrating. You get this cool landscape and then like you're like, oh well, I don't really get to use it though very much. But on the other hand, like having it be a limited resources is interesting from a design standpoint. There's not really a way to meaningfully talk about whether or not it's good or not. I don't think, like, unlike the other liaisons, like when it's more like the Baker token in this, like the Baker token does not affect how good or bad of a card Baker is, and the +4 favors on importer do not affect how good or bad of a card importer is, except maybe in indirect ways. Like if it turns out that having a guaranteed 5 favors for certain allies makes this card better contextually because there are certain things you can do that, as a consequence of being able to spend those favors, like something like that. But like in general, you get the favors regardless of whether you ever pick up an importer or not. So this is really going to affect the allies more than it's going to affect importer. Anyway, let's move on to Courier. So Courier, +1 coin, or 4 cost action, +1 coin, discard the top card of your deck, look through your discard pile, you may play an action or treasure from it. Okay. So the idea here compared to Herb Gatherer is like you're discarding something so that you have something in your discard pile, but obviously the risk that you just have nothing is much higher. Like if you were, not that I would recommend it, but if you were to open with this card and see it on turn 3, you could end up discarding an estate and just womp, forget it. It's kind of like it's definitely comparable to Vassal, right? It discards the top card of your deck like Vassal does, and it plays something directly like Vassal does. It also gives you a coin. Vassal gives you 2 coins, but similar thing there. Obviously, compared to Vassal, like it has more upside because the fact that you can play something from your discard pile means like if you have a discard pile to begin with, you have more options. If you have some kind of discard for benefit, that would help you out. Even if you just have sifting, even if it's just warehouse or something to be able to set up your Courier. So like this is going to be usually more reliable than Vassal, although the fact that it's generating half as much money means building a deck around it is maybe not going to be as powerful. I guess it depends on. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on whether that reliability, the difference in reliability, potentially is going to be enough to overcome like the lack of money that it's generating, and it might. I mean, I guess for a Vassal deck, normally a card like Warehouse would be like actively potentially bad because reducing your hand size, usually, I mean, if for like a at least for like a pure Vassal deck, reducing your hand size is like going to be a pretty big limitation. But here it's not. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, I guess it depends on whether you can fit draw cards into the deck or not. And you can sometimes fit draw cards into a Vassal deck, but it kind of depends on whether there's villages, essentially. So when I say pure Vassal deck, I mean like one that doesn't have any villages, where you're relying entirely on the Vassal chaining. Either that or I guess there's also like, something like Vassal with Festival, where you're relying on the chaining not for the village effect necessarily, but for actually being able to move through your deck, like because you have no draw. So like for Courier, it's more flexible in that you can do something like play a Warehouse and then discard something and then play the Courier, to hit a draw card and draw back up. Whereas like with the Vassal deck, I mean, I guess in theory you could still do that so long as you could get all the way around your shuffle, but it'd be a lot harder to take advantage of. Anyway, the Vassal definitely seems like the most comparable card. In my opinion, Vassal is often awkward, even when it's working. If it is the central like way that your deck is functioning. If it's something that you add in because you have the space for it, but you have ways to like set it up reliably, and you have other forms of deck control, then I think it works better. If in this case, I mean, I don't think Courier is going to be too dissimilar in that respect. Like you're going to have a lot of turns, of course, where you start with like no discard pile, and so you're gonna basically be reliant on the top card of your deck hitting in the same way that you would be with Vassal anyway. So it is too bad that it doesn't discard your entire deck the way that Herb Gatherer does, because if it did, then then it would really, like, you could really guarantee that it was gonna work out. But maybe that would be too powerful. I'm not sure. And I'm not sure why it gives you +1 instead of +2. Like if this discard pile thing is really that much better. Maybe it is. I'll have to see. But looking at this, I'm thinking that like it's gonna fit into the same decks that Vassal is, and so yeah, you're just gonna get a lot less money from it. And I suspect that's going to be a problem, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, Royal Galley is our next card. 4-cost action duration, +1 card. You may play a non-duration action card from your hand. Set it aside. If you did, then at the start of your next turn, play it. Okay, so this is a, like, it's a throne that doesn't play the card twice at once. It plays, it's once now and once later. It's kind of like Captain in that sense, but obviously Captain is a command card. The fact that this draws 1 card is interesting. That's a pretty unusual thing to have, where it's like +1 card but not +1 action. I mean, it is essentially +1 action, of course, because you play an action from your hand, but it's not like if for whatever reason you don't want to Royal Galley some particular action card. Like you don't want it to be stuck out with the Royal Galley or something, then you do lose your action. Yeah, I mean, this definitely seems like it could be really nice for reliability. Just simple stuff like, I play my Royal Galley, I play my village, and then my village, I'm going to have my village to start with next turn. And, as with Captain and other, sort of start of turn effects, it's actually going to be better at the start of next turn because I don't have to spend a card or an action to play it. So like where my village right now, is draw neutral and gives me a net 1 action. Next turn, it's draw positive and gives me a net 2 actions. And same thing with, anything else like draw cards and whatever. So that's pretty nice. Unlike Captain, there's no cost restriction on it. So you could galley a King's Court, right? And I don't know how, like, I don't know how often having the other card like stuck out is going to matter, but I mean, if you compare like Galleying a King's Court to Mastermind, for example, like you get the triple play at the start of your turn in both cases, but with the Galley King's Court thing, you also get the triple play now. So, that seems really, really good. Now, obviously, it requires extra setup to pull that off, but yeah, I mean, this seems like it has a lot of potential, and can really, could really set up something very explosive. One thing I guess to watch out for is that if you do use Royal Galley on some other kind of throne effect, like a King's Court, you can't combine that with something else that you also put on your Royal Galley. So like if you Royal Galley 2 King's Courts, and those are the only King's Courts in your deck, then you can't do King's Court that next turn, because you'll play the one and then you'll play the other. You won't be able to play the one on the other. Another thing to note, the if you did clause. So if you play this with like a Royal Carriage or a Wine Merchant or some other card that goes to your Tavern mat or has some other way of leaving play, if it trashes itself, etc., then the Royal Galley will not come into effect. Like, you won't play it the next turn. So yeah, if you play Royal Galley, Wine Merchant, then your Royal Galley won't stay out, and all that happens is that you played the Wine Merchant now, and you cycled the Royal Galley out of the way, I guess. But so that's something to be aware of. Like, unlike, because if you throne a Wine Merchant, you just get the full value from it. Or you King's Court a Wine Merchant, you just get the full value of that multiplay, and it doesn't stay out. So you get the extra coins, and it's cheap. You just only cost 2 to discard the Wine Merchant, and that's all very synergistic, and it doesn't work with Royal Galley. So that's something to definitely pay attention to. But yeah, I mean, as a throne variant, I would say overall, this is compared to Throne Room, which is also a 4 cost. This is probably worse in terms of building an explosive deck, but definitely better for reliability. So that's kind of what you're doing, is you're trading some of the explosive power for reliability, because like when you play the card the next turn, like, it is going to be better than having played it from your hand this turn, but it's still not going to be doubled. So it's still not going to be as strong as throning a card would be. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting card. And it definitely seems like a good card. All right, so Donald X describes Courier as the peddler version of Mountain Village. I don't really see that. I mean, I get why he says that. It's +1 coin, and it is effectively +1 card and +1 action, but also not guaranteed, and like it really feels more like Vassal to me. The fact that it can play treasures is obviously different than Vassal. I didn't really talk about that. But that's not what you want to do most of the time anyway. Like, if you're playing a treasure, most of the time you're sad about it, I think. You wanted to play an action. Anyway, we've also got some more allies. So, first we've got Family of Inventors. At the start of your buy phase, you may put a favor token you have on a non-victory supply pile. Cards cost 1 less per favor token on their piles. Oh, wow. Okay, so this is like a really flexible fairy. You can... it says you may put a favor, so I'm assuming you can't just dump all your favors at once. Which is going to be pretty relevant if you're in a game with Importer. You can't just be like, like, which costs 0, let's go. But you can make it cost 4 and make sure that you can open with it, which seems really good. In general, I mean, this is turning like any sort of favor generator into a limited scope but permanent like bridge effect, which seems very powerful. Like, I mean, okay, so it's not going to affect victory cards, which is a big difference. You're not going to get a bridge megaturn style thing out of Family of Inventors, no matter how many of these you build up, because you're not going to be able to take green off of it. Though you're still, I mean, being able to buy like, tons of good, well, and it also doesn't give you plus buy, so you may not have plus buy, but supposing you do, being able to get tons of good action cards is obviously still very valuable. And like I said, you're going to start with 1 favor, so you can open with any 5 cost you want in the typical case of a 4/3 opening or 3/4 opening. You can discount your favorite 5 cost and then pick it up. So that's really good. It's pretty similar in that respect to starting with the Baker token, within the scope of the opening at least. You can also, on a 5/2, pick up a 6 cost. And then, yeah, I mean, over time, you can kind of make whatever pile you want really cheap, potentially. I mean, even with Importer, you only have the 5 favors. I mean, you get them all right away, so you can, at that point, you can potentially open with like a 5 and a 4, like a 6 and a 3, because you're going to be able to spend a favor on turn 1 and turn 2. But you can, I mean, it's like 2.5 fairies with Importer. Like, that's already a lot of discounting. You can, if you've got a liaison that is generating favors over time, though, I mean, you can really get some cheap stuff. I guess one question to ask is like how quickly you can do it. I mean, it's certainly a lot quicker than like League of Bankers, right? Like, granted, like, so the League of Bankers coins apply to everything. Every additional coin that you get for that, can be used to buy anything on the board, not just, 1 pile. But this, you can accumulate 4 times as quickly. You're not usually aiming to buy cards from every single pile anyway. And the discount, of course, stacks if you're buying multiple things from the same pile. So, if you like, oh, I'm going to make markets cost like 2, right? Now that's, like a 3 coin discount on markets is a lot stronger than having plus 3 coins with which to buy markets. So this seems really good to me. Well worth investing in a liaison in order to activate this effect. And then we've got Gang of Pickpockets, source of the happy, happy, joy, joy emoji I see. At the start of your turn, discard down to 4 cards in hand unless you spend a favor. Yeah, so this is really kind of an inverse ally, that you're not getting anything out of this ally, you're just spending favors to have it leave you alone. This will be a really sad one to get with Importer, where you just like can't defend yourself against the hand size attack in the long run, and you just have to decide when, what 5 turns during the game do I not want to get hit with this hand size attack. It was discard down to 4 cards too. It's not discard a card, if you have, 4 or more cards or whatever. So like if you squirrel or, expedition or whatever, get wrecked. It's start of turn, so you can, like, if you have duration draw, you can do this first and then do your duration draw, so that part isn't affected, but although you do have less search space to decide what you're going to discard, which is also annoying. But yeah, if you have I don't know what the category is for things like Squirrel and Expedition, but it cleanup draw, I don't know, but but yeah, that's going to be pretty bad. Fortunately, like, I imagine with a lot of the liaisons, it won't be too difficult to build up enough favors that you can essentially discard every turn that you don't have like a green card in hand or whatever. So like, for example, if you got Gang of Pickpockets, you start with 1 favor, you just discard an estate in each time in the opening. It doesn't really matter. And then going into your next shuffle, like, depending on what you open with, like, you may or may not care about discarding estates again, and then eventually you pick up your underling or whatever, and you start generating favors, and at some point you're like, oh, I have an estate this turn, I'll discard it, I won't spend the favor, accumulate some favors. Now maybe I don't see my underling, but I've accumulated a couple of favors, and so I can go a couple turns in a row, not discarding when I have only good cards in my hand, blah, 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 blah. So, I think it will be manageable in many cases. But some of these liaisons are fairly limited, right? Like Student, you got to have treasures to trash. Obviously, Importer, where it's just like the hard cap. Broker, you got to trash something. So, we'll have to see what the other liaisons look like. But, in games where the liaisons, like, one way to think about it is with Student or Broker, if all you're doing is trashing a card in order not to discard a card, you're not really making progress, because the card that you had to trash could have been just like the card that you would have discarded anyway. It's just not totally accurate, because you might get some trash for benefit value out of it, and you might more so with Broker than with Student, but still. And you might not see that card at the beginning of your turn, and it might matter that you had all 5 cards at the beginning of the turn and then could get the favor at the end of the turn or something. But still, that that might often turn out to be like not a worthwhile trade-off. You might just sort of accept the discard attack. But yeah, this is it's an interesting design space. I don't I don't dislike it as a thing. I mean, I'm sure there will be games where I'm like, oh no, like the pickpockets, why? But I think it's an interesting idea, to spice things up. So I'm down for it. All right. So what else do we have here? So the cards will stay playable over the weekend. They will be gone until Wednesday, when they'll be available both there and on TGG. We expect the physical version to follow at around the same time, but it's harder to nail down. It'll be around then, though. So Wednesday is the 9th. So I guess the official release date is the 9th of March. I think Steph did mention that in a post earlier. So yeah, it's right around the corner that we'll get the full set. And Donald X also says I'll return with Seaside 2E previews around late April. It's a little hard to pin down just yet, so we can look forward to that. In the meantime, I will be back with some or with a like a full rundown of the entire set next week when that releases. So I'll go through the entire rulebook, every card, give my thoughts on all of those. That'll probably be a pretty long video, but hopefully I can keep it a little bit snappier than these previews have been. In any case, thanks for watching. Go check out the previews this weekend on the client, and until next week.